Hey you, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to bring you to somewhere interesting in Singapore, which is also much lesser known to many Singaporeans. Now this place has a very deep history and also a very interesting history, and it is much visited by students, residents around this area as well as tourists. This place is none other than the Japanese Cemetery Park in Singapore. The story of this place is really interesting. The Pacific War ended in August 1945, and back then about 8,000 Japanese citizens who were living in Singapore evacuated to a camp which was set up in Jurong while waiting for the return vessels. Now after the first and second vessels had left, many women were still stranded and they became increasingly restless and unhappy. There was a lack of vegetables, increase in diseases and deaths, which happened one after another, and some even killed themselves. The number of those who died at the Jurong camp amounted to 41, and in the later years, the managers of a Japanese restaurant in Katong, the Koshitsu Imai, initiated to set up the Hinomoto Jizo, which is also the deity guardian of Japan, and it is actually placed here to pray for the souls of those who had died. Now this Jizo statue also include prayers for safe deliveries of Japanese women residing in Singapore and the protection of their children. There is actually a very interesting map here, the Japanese Cemetery Park map. Unfortunately, everything is in Japanese, so it's not very easy for us to understand what is written on this map. If you're coming here, it's good to know that there are signs along the way to actually explain what is happening around these areas, and it's actually in Japanese as well as English, so you won't quite get too lost understanding what exactly is happening in this area. Now unfortunately for us, there are so many rocks with these Japanese looking inscriptions and we don't quite understand what they actually mean, but it's really quite interesting to see these rocks and stones all in different designs. It looks like they took a natural rock and then they just carve out the words that they want on top of the rock. Those are Japanese coins, yeah. Is it? Oh, they are Singapore coins too. Yeah. Not too sure whether maybe this is like a prayer place for them. There's actually been a building which has been kind of like right close to the entrance of this place, and it's quite a nice, magnificent looking building, so let's check it out. So I'm not too sure what this box here represents, but there are some pieces of paper down here. Let's see. Oh my god, what is that? Oh, this is scary. These envelopes here are for donations, so you can put a certain amount of money in and then you just drop it in this box here. Similar to a temple that I visited in Japan, they actually do have this washing area, but in Japan it's much bigger and we actually had to drink the water. It was actually for good blessing. I'm not too sure what this one is here for. No, I'm still not too sure what this building is here for, but it kind of freaked me out when I was going close to the entrance and then there was this speaker that just turned on. It's like a really quiet place here, so I wasn't expecting any sound at all. Now if you're coming here, do note that there is also a toilet, so if you need the toilet, just come to the back of this building and you will find a toilet here. Now I just took a look inside this building and I will not be recording it because I see somewhat what looks like a temple. I don't think I'll be recording what's inside the temple. Japanese cemeteries seem to have very interesting structures for their tombstones. Now most of the tombstones you see around here are generally similar in the sense that maybe they have a smaller surrounding structure around the tombstone, or that the tombstones are actually standing on their own. But you will also notice some tombstones which look a little more extravagant, and this is one example of it. You can see that it has a much bigger area and there are a couple of tombstones in there, so usually these belong to more important people or significant people in the Japanese history in Singapore. So these three gravestones actually belong to Navy soldiers, and actually one of them belongs to this person called Kusumoto, who is actually the first Japanese who was buried in Singapore. So he was actually buried somewhere in a Christian church cemetery along Bukit Timah and was forgotten for many years. And then one day a Japanese publishing house discovered his gravestone about 50 years later and decided that maybe his soul was feeling a little lonely being in a foreign place. So they took his body and actually buried it here together with other Japanese. If you look at these two tombstones, you can see that the one on the left has a very different design. It's very intricate, it's nicer than the most common tombstones that you see, which is just basically a rectangular block at the bottom and then another rectangular block at the top. And then on the right side, you can see one which is made with very special stone. I believe this probably belongs to a very rich Japanese family. I'm not too sure whether this actually marks a burial area because it is very tall compared to most other structures around this area. Now it looks like this area is actually a burial place for quite important people to the Japanese You can see that this burial area is quite different as compared to most other burial areas. So it is actually surrounded by a very nicely cut grass, and it's also surrounded by quite huge structures. It seems like there are two main areas of this cemetery. So one would be right behind me now, which is where you see a lot of the tombstones that we actually covered earlier on in this video. And then there's a lower portion here which seem to have kind of like modern plaques. So I'm not too sure what this area is for, but earlier on you can see a huge structure there, and it actually has the names of people who have donated to probably this cemetery. So now let's go check out what these plaques are at the lower portion of this cemetery. Alright, so as you can see, these rocks actually have these plaques which are engraving the names of people who had actually donated probably to the Japanese society or this cemetery. The story about these tombstones here is that these tombstones were actually laid here even before this place was considered a Japanese cemetery. Okay, so that's why these tombstones are generally like the oldest tombstones, or rather the oldest buried people in this area in this cemetery. If you are wondering where is one interesting place to actually visit in your free time, you want a peaceful place to come and visit, then this Japanese cemetery garden or park is a really wonderful place that you can visit. There are ample shaded sitting areas for you around this park, so you'll definitely enjoy yourself taking pictures, enjoying the history around this area. It's really wonderful. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to help us by liking this video, sharing this video with your friends, and subscribing to us. And we'll see you in the next video. Thank you once again. Stay cool, stay awesome, and be your best always. Bye!